Good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this live stream, this Beethoven live tribute for the 250 years. I'm Alexandre Len. This is the first time I appear on an InPulse Creative live. I'm very happy. We took a long time to set up all the streams since I think now April or May. It's been a long time. Thank you very much for all the people joining right now. Now we're more than 10. It's incredible just to start. Today, this is a very special stream, a very special event because we took the time to really do something professional, something very respectful regarding the sound and the cameras and everything. It took a while because we worked since I think November to do that, but we're very happy to share that with you. I will not be part, of course, of this. This stream will be presented by two wonderful pianists, Dimitri Malignan and Dominic Cheli, and I'm going to move right now to them so they can speak to you. Hi guys, how are you?
Hey Alex, great to be here today.
Hey, hey,
Hi,
hey.
nice
So
to see you guys.
yeah, it's wonderful to have you here. It's been so difficult to do that, but we finally did it. It's wonderful to see that working well, and see all those people already there. Thank you very much for being here. Do not hesitate to use the chat at any moment to ask your questions. They will not be maybe they will they will not be able to answer right now or at the moment you ask the questions, but they will take the time to answer while the people are talking or anything. So guys, maybe you can present yourself a little bit. Let's start with you, Dominic.
Hi everyone. So this is Dominic Cheli. I'm coming to you from America, Los Angeles, California. So as Alex wished everyone a good night, I'm actually it's a bright and early morning out where I am. So I'm starting my day off with this wonderful celebration with my good friend Dimitri and Alex. It's a real pleasure to be here today. So I'm an American pianist. I was born and raised here. I studied at various schools across America: Manhattan School of Music, Yale University, and the Colburn School. And now, after leaving the scholastic life, I'm now just living downtown here. I've been having the pleasure of streaming on the InPulse Creatives Twitch channel for, I guess, a few months now, and I think it's just an absolutely priceless opportunity for young artists, musicians of any kind, to be able to share with our public, our audience during this pandemic. So, real treat to be here, and looking forward to hearing Dimitri play and chat with him as well. So, Dimitri, you want to say a few words?
Yes, so hello everyone. My name is Dimitri Malignan. I'm a French pianist, and I'm today in my home in Paris. So for me, it's the evening actually, so we have almost 1 day of difference, but that's really cool about this opportunity of doing, this live stream. I mean, we are in the same time, but we're on other continents, especially right now in the middle of the pandemic. It's really a great tool. And so, yeah, about me. So, I'm 22. I studied in Paris at the École Normale de Musique Alfred Cortot. And I've been studying in Amsterdam in the Netherlands now for some years. So, so yeah, I'm also very much looking forward to celebrate Beethoven today because we didn't really have an opportunity to do it like in real, like on stage. Unfortunately, we didn't really have concerts this year for obvious reasons. So yeah, I'm happy we could make it happen today with this live stream.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here, everyone, really. And do not hesitate to use the chat at any moment, and I will also be there to answer. I will leave them, of course, do this wonderful stream. I'm not going to interfere at all. But before we leave, I think that's great to mention one thing is that you guys met during the pandemic. You never physically met. And that's something very, very funny, very fun. I think maybe you could talk a little bit about it because I think people will be interested into that.
Yes, so I mean, thanks to you, Alex, who initiated this Close Encounters series on Twitch. So I was doing my live streams alone since July, I think, and Dominic was also doing his own live streams. And then at some point we said, yeah, let's try something, let's do something together because we kind of share the same interests and we are both very dedicated pianists, of course. And we said, let's try to play. I mean, I don't know whose idea it was actually at the beginning, but to play something in four hands, but
Yeah, that's right.
like
That's right.
and to put it together, and we played a little piece by Gabriel Fauré, and it went very well. And then we of course had many other projects, and especially this Beethoven project.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I'm really happy to see that everything's working out. And before 2021, we had the opportunity to for you to play together during live stream. I want to mention one thing also for the public is that we were not able to do a live stream where Dimitri and Dominic would play together at the same time. It was impossible. We tried. We tried to find some ways, but it's impossible. We have like close to 5 milliseconds difference sometimes, so it's very difficult to do four hands or even like two pianos things. So it was better to do like a dialogue, a debate about Beethoven and play masterpieces one at a time. But I think you will enjoy it. So I think I'm gonna sneak here. I'm gonna go away. I'm gonna let you do the stream. So thank you very much, guys, for that. And you in the public, enjoy the stream. Again, do not hesitate to use the chat as much as possible. Ask your questions or just share your thoughts. That will be more than interesting. So, guys, have a nice stream and see you at the end. Bye.
Yeah. Cheers.
Thanks, Alex. So I think for this live stream, we'd love to start things off from the very beginning, honestly. And I think I'll be playing the first movement of Beethoven's very first piano sonata. So you'll be hearing a lot of piano music today, of course, but I think from the very get-go, we see that Beethoven is already someone that's sparking the imagination through his writing, through his inspiration, and we see already this rather defiant and really self-assured young man who's trying to prove himself in this vast world of Europe, of Germany. These early sonatas, he wrote his first three sonatas were all published in a set, because at the time it was popular to sort of have multiple pieces that you would present in your second opus. This is opus 2, number 1 that I'll be playing. And each sonata is a little bit different. The first sonata in F minor is turbulent. It has Beethoven with his fist in the air. And it's dedicated to Joseph Haydn, actually. Joseph Haydn was a composer that some of you may have heard of, but if not, he's one of the most famous composers of the classical period. He was also credited as being Beethoven's mentor, even though Beethoven profusely declared that he learned nothing from him, which of course I would say, and I think Dimitri might agree, is not necessarily all true. But in this sonata, though, we see striking, interesting harmonies, melodies, and we already see that Beethoven is taking a small little cell in this piece. He's taking these little pieces, fragments, and he creates a whole movement out of them. So listen for these sort of, I always think of them as sort of like rockets as they're rising. And then these little twisting little motives that wonderfully, in a very coquette-like way, create a little bit of a spark. So in this sonata, there's all of that, and Beethoven at his young formative years. So I think I'll play the first movement, and without further ado, please enjoy. So that was the first sonata, the first movement of Beethoven. And I don't know, Dimitri, have you played this piece before, or?
I haven't actually. I played the Opus 2 number 3, so
Oh,
also
of
an
course.
early sonata of the
Yes,
same
yes.
set. But
One of the most difficult too.
yeah, actually, the beginning with the thirds, and but no, I haven't played this one. But you played it amazingly, really.
Oh, well, thank
Great.
you. You know, personally, the thing about Beethoven that's really interesting is that in his music, in the first movement of sonatas, he always has a repeat that takes us back to the beginning, and this is something that he does throughout his entire career. And in some sonatas, sometimes the repeats can be very long, but in a sonata like this, with the first movement as compressed, as compact as this sonata, I find that you almost have to hear it again just to understand all of these little concepts that Beethoven's throwing our way. I would say. So that for anyone that's curious why I took the repeat that at the beginning, that's one of the reasons. I always love how Beethoven is constantly, even from his early years, confusing our expectations with rhythmic and sometimes accent type and dynamic irregularities. And we'll see more of that as the stream goes on and we hear more music. But Beethoven was a huge fan of the unexpected, I would say, and also with experimentation. But yeah, this is one of my favorite pieces to play because it just feels so alive as Beethoven's being born again. And for anyone that's curious, the very first pieces that Beethoven ever published were the piano trios. Piano trios of cello, violin, and piano. Those were Opus 1. He felt that the piano trio would have been a stronger statement for him in his early career. And actually, Haydn, also his mentor, encouraged him to publish the trios first, despite reservations that they were too hard to listen to. So they were not easy listening. Of course, today many of us would disagree on that, then he published his piano sonatas as Opus 2. So yeah, it's a great beginning set. But but in any case, I know that Dimitri would love to play some music as well now. So Dimitri,
Yeah,
what would
sure.
you want to play?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a little comment first about this because so it was written in 1794, 95 now, something like.
Yes.
And I was going to say that it's fairly old, to write a first sonata. Like he was 24, and obviously, like Mozart, for example, was writing pieces much younger than that. So it's interesting that he waited to be quite mature, already to
This is
publish
true.
his first sonata. And I mean, it's really true because we find everything that we know about Beethoven, already in this sonata. Although it's, as you said, very much still, in the shadow of Haydn and structure-wise, especially. But we find, as you said, all the accents, all the sforzatos, the syncopas, everything that is really Beethoven, and that we will find more and more often.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I guess I wanted to play also first movement of sonata, but we will move a bit into time. So we will go to the Opus 26. So that's already his 12th sonata. And this sonata was written in 1801. And so the thing with Beethoven, with his works, you can kind of divide them into three periods, and especially with the sonatas. So you would have the first period with your sonata, of course, this young period. Then a middle period where Beethoven develops a bit more, all the ideas he had, and kind of, the structure is a bit more elaborate and everything. And then a later period, which is obviously amazing, and where he has his very unique style. And this sonata, Opus 26, well, you have two ways of seeing it. It's either the last sonata of the first period or the first sonata of the second period. So it depends how you want to see it. But for sure, it's at the border a bit of two periods. It's the first sonata he wrote in the 19th century. So that's already kind of a milestone. And so you will see it's quite different from what you played. And yeah, so I will play the first movement of this sonata, and you guys can let us know what you think.
Beautiful playing, Dimitri. This is one of my favorite sonatas to listen to. Actually, I find it to be such a special work, and I actually have not played it yet. Only studied it, but I think that in this sonata, personally, I definitely see that it is a bridge to the middle period. Whether it's specifically in the middle or the early, I don't know, but I definitely see with an andante, a slow movement with variations opening the sonata. This is already a swift departure from the Haydn Mozart era, so to speak. And certainly, there's also a really interesting, I guess, another slow movement in this work. You know, talk a little bit about that slow movement of this sonata.
Yeah, for sure, because basically this sonata became famous most of all because of its slow movement. So, which is a funeral march, and so this sonata as a whole was one of the favorites of Frédéric Chopin, for instance. And he was probably inspired, when he wrote his own second sonata with the very famous funeral march. He was inspired by this sonata by Beethoven, which has the funeral march, and also this sonata was written just 1 year before the third symphony, the Eroica symphony, and this funeral march has the mention. It is written on the death of a hero. So there are many legends, surrounding the title of this movement. We don't really know who was this hero, but nonetheless, this sonata became mostly famous for its slow movements. I'll just play the very beginning a little bit. And so yeah, the slow movement of the sonata, which is very impressive with its very solemn character, of course. And so about the first movement also, what is interesting is that for people who follow us and who don't really know about structure and everything, so the first movement you played was in sonata allegro form, which is very basic for a sonata, which is very common, which was used very much at that time and later on also. And this first movement was theme with variations, which is rather unusual for the time. And Beethoven would use this structure quite often, especially in his later sonatas. In 109, 111, you have the theme and variations. So yeah, that's a completely different approach. I think you guys heard the difference in character, in structure, in everything. And but what is interesting is that it's only 5 years between the two sonatas. Basically 5-6 years. So Beethoven evolved very fast in his writing, because later on you will listen to sonatas which were written in 1820, for example, and it's complete different world. So it's very interesting, and that's what we wanted to show today, is the kind of how many styles Beethoven used, from his first sonata to his last sonata. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I would say that this sonata is perhaps a perfect segue into the next work that I will present, which is a beautiful song of Beethoven's. Now, I mean song, not a piece. This is actually a song for vocals, a vocalist and piano. Oftentimes people sometimes will call a Beethoven piano sonata a song, but in a very specific sense, a song in classical music always refers to a singer and piano. And that's not something that necessarily people always associate with Beethoven, songs. We always associate perhaps symphonies, piano sonatas, quartets perhaps with Beethoven. And when you think about singers, well, you think about the Ninth Symphony perhaps. That's the first thing that comes to mind for many people. But during this time during the pandemic, I really had more opportunity to listen to lots of different music and explore the repertoire, and I found myself studying works of Beethoven that I never heard, and this was one of them. Others are some beautiful cantatas that he wrote in his early years, but this song, Opus 32, which was written in 1804, which is again just 3 years after Dimitri's sonata, Opus 26. This sonata is this song is quite in the same vein, same style, I would say, as the Opus 26 sonata. It's quite melodic. It's quite. It really shows. It's a really stark difference from the Opus 2 number 1 sonata that I played at the opening. The Opus 2 number 1 sonata is almost like bony. It's spiky. It's very skeleton-like. It's very compact. And now we have more luscious harmony. We have melodies that have more legato quality to them, and we see some people really unfairly say that Beethoven didn't know how to write a melody. He only knew how to develop small ideas, which, admittedly, I don't think anyone in history has ever been able to develop ideas of such compactness as well as Beethoven. Look at his Fifth Symphony, for example. We hear this melody transformed hundreds of times throughout that first movement, and that's all really that he uses to keep our interest. But Beethoven knew how to write a melody when he felt like it, is what I always say. And here he really felt like it. In this song, it's entitled An die Hoffnung, a German title. The title translates as To Hope. Now, that's a very specific title with some very specific connotations as well. Beethoven was, in some ways, a hopeless romantic. He was never quite. He never married. but he was also never quite successful with women, the women that he was attracted to. All throughout his life, he was constantly pursuing women that he was in love with, and he was constantly rejected, rebuffed, and which is rather painful, certainly for him, as he did crave human connection, and it is a little tragic that he never quite found that. The closest he found, though, was with a woman named Josephine Brunswick. Now, when Beethoven was a young man, we have to remember that composers of this time, they didn't simply make a living off composing. Beethoven made most of his money, oftentimes as a young man, off teaching as well. So he was teaching, composing, performing, all three. That was what he had to do to make a living. And so he was teaching such young women and men from aristocratic families. At the time, in culture, it was considered to be very, very good etiquette for females to play the piano, so most of his students were female. And two of his students were a pair of sisters, Josephine and Teresa. Both of these women made a strong impact on him. Beethoven's 24th Sonata in F sharp major, a really delightful gem of the repertoire, and rather a more unassuming one, and not grand in scale. It's a mere 2 movements. It's really beautiful. It's dedicated to Teresa, but Josephine is the woman that I think draws the most interest for many reasons. Number one is that he dedicated more music to her, and also very, very striking music. It makes you think about their relationship. This was one of the first pieces that he dedicated to Josephine. Again, he wrote it in 1804, and Josephine, by all accounts, by her diaries, by her writings, she was in many ways infatuated with Beethoven. How could you not be? This was a young man who had unlimited potential. He was a genius. He was a virtuoso. When he sat down to play, he would oftentimes just make people swoon. Because we also have to remember that Beethoven was, in addition to his performing as a soloist, he was often doing piano duels where he would improvise against other pianists. They'd be given 8 bars of music, and they would improvise upon that, and they would see who wins this competition. So he had this sort of competitive streak and this sort of bravura about him that was obviously very attractive. However, he was not from a noble class. Noble, I mean aristocratic, a wealthy class. He wasn't from that area of living. And Josephine, unfortunately, was. And for her, that is who she ended up marrying. She ended up marrying a duke. Her first husband did pass away, but Beethoven and her were in touch through their letters. And by all accounts, when he dedicated this piece to her and sent it to her, she was quite flattered. However, she was also a little bit embarrassed because the song screams of hope and hope for something in the future. And that, being a married woman and having this piece of romanticism dedicated to you, was a little bit controversial and a little bit, I would say, incisive of rumor and gossip. And so I'll read you the poetry actually that goes along with this song. So the poetry is there a God? Will he someday fulfill the promises for which longing cries out? Will, before the court of the world, this puzzle ever reveal itself? Man must hope, he does not ask. You, who so gladly celebrates on sacred nights, and gently and softly veils the grief that torments a tender soul, O hope! Raised through you, let the sufferer feel that there above an angel counts his tears. When, long hushed, beloved voices are silenced. When, underneath dead branches, memory sits desolate. Then come closer to where your forsaken one mourns, and look around at midnight, supports himself against sunken urns. And if he looks up to accuse fate, when departing with his days, the last rays set, then permit him to see at the rim of his earthly dream the light of the clouds hue from the nearby sun. So this is poetry that I think, looking forward, inspires someone like Schubert. We see, honestly, a man or a human of some kind crying out that he's longing for something that he can't have. That's the gist of this poem, and he's hoping for longing, but at the same time he's saying not to accuse fate, or he's not basically not saying, oh, woe is me, it's not my fault, God did this to me. It's not about that. It's not about accusing someone else. It's about just letting your suffering, your longing, your sadness out. And so again, reading that poetry, hearing this song that you're about to hear, and then having it dedicated to a married woman, all of this trifecta of three different attributes really made Josephine uncomfortable. And she asked Beethoven to remove the dedication, and he did. He ended up dedicating it simply to the author of the poem, Christoph Tige, and that was I guess that was the correct thing to do in terms of their relationship. And again, to give a little bit of a more brief understanding of who Josephine meant to Beethoven, they did stay in contact for many, many years together through letters and all the above. Beethoven dedicated, a rather funny story for me is that he dedicated the very famous Appassionata Sonata to her, originally. The Appassionata Sonata... This really, I would say, emotionally wrought and tormented work was dedicated to her. But, again, this piece really caused her a little bit of concern because she was married. This sonata entitled Appassionata being dedicated to her, it didn't look so good in the gossip world. So she again asked him to remove that dedication, which he did reluctantly, grudgingly, and grumpily. He simply dedicated it to her brother, who he had never met, didn't know, but it was sort of him kind of being a little bit, well, if I can't dedicate it to you, I'll just dedicate it to your brother. I don't care. So I always found this story a little bit amusing. Another really wonderful work is the Andante Favori, which was dedicated to Josephine, and that melody he tries to amplify her name into it through rhythmic type textures. But more importantly, the most pivotal point of their relationship was in 1812. In 1812, at this time, Josephine's first husband had died. She at the time she was in a tumultuous relationship with a second duke, a second count of aristocratic nobility, but things were not going so well, and they had taken a break. So, in the summer of 1812, she was sort of without a man and kind of without a little bit of hope. And actually, in that summer, her and Beethoven did meet. We don't know exactly what happened during the summer, but we do know in the summer of 1812 that the letter, "The Immortally Beloved," was written. And it was written again to an anonymous woman who he called the Immortal Beloved. And so everyone was always wondering, who is this woman? Who is this? But for me, I really think it was Josephine. This is my theory, this is my conjecture, because after meeting in the summer of 1812, in April of 1813, 9 months later, she had a baby. I don't know, the timing of this is a little bit suspect, it's a little bit curious. And certainly what's also curious is that the baby's name was Minona. And some people have made some conjectures that Minona, M-I-N-O-N-A, if you look at it backwards, it's anonymous. And perhaps it's because this child was perhaps something that they wanted to keep a secret. I don't know. Minona is a name that I've talked to many people from Germany, and no one's ever heard of this name this name existing really in common culture. So Minona is a very specific and really interesting name to have chosen. So whether Beethoven did father this child, this girl, or not, is still speculation. But it's definitely an interesting story, and there's a lot of drama between Beethoven and Josephine. I will play this song now. Sorry for talking so much, but for me, this is actually one of the most pivotal moments of Beethoven's life, in this decade between 1804 and, well, 1813 or so. And this would influence him throughout the rest of his life, as this was the one woman that he really felt, I think, the most strongly for, and he never was able to connect with her. And also this frustration, I feel that in many ways, as we'll see in his later sonatas, this frustration of not being able to be there for his child manifests itself in his late sonatas, in frustration as well as in other things involving his obsession with his nephew and his obsession with gaining custody of his nephew, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later. In any case, this song is for voice and piano, originally a tenor, male singer and piano. In this case, I won't be singing, unfortunately for all of you, or fortunately for you. I'll be playing a transcription that I made of this song. I transcribed it for the solo piano. Now, this song is in 3 verses. So, in other words, you have verse 1, repeat, different words, verse 2, repeat, different words, verse 3. Now, since I am just playing the piano, I had to make a little bit of a difference for each verse. So, instead of changing the words, I changed the music slightly. I wrote variations. So, in following Dimitri's variations, here are my own variations based upon Beethoven's An die Hoffnung. So I hope you enjoy.
Amazing.
Oh.
Really
Thank,
beautiful. Beautiful.
thank you. Yes, I think that one can't help that. Indeed, this again, when you listen to the words, when you listen to the music, you see that Beethoven felt something for Josephine. That's for sure, in my opinion. Beautiful stuff. But and certainly, again, Beethoven was not just a composer of all these other types of things. His songs are really exquisite. This being one of my favorites. And again, there are two versions of An die Hoffnung. There's an early and a late version. This is the early version. He wrote another piece entitled that as well. So, Opus 32, An die Hoffnung, 1804, is this one. I urge everyone to go listen to the original with the singer. Peter Schreier is one of my favorites. So please go listen to that. It's really something else. But Dimitri, have you heard this song before, or?
No, actually, when we talked about, when we started preparing this stream, you mentioned this song, and I must admit I never heard it, and I mean, I knew Beethoven wrote some songs, but as you said, it's not what we think of Beethoven. We think of the sonatas, the concerto,
Certainly.
symphonies, whatever. And I wanted to ask you if you know, because this type of song, it's something quite new for the time, I think, no? Because,
Yes.
I mean, you had, of course, the opera and whatsoever, but this kind of, it's like the lead that would come, later on with Schubert and Schumann and all the other German composers. So that's something quite new for the time, I think.
Yes, I would absolutely say so. You think about Haydn, Mozart, even Bach, composers before this, they were not necessarily writing lead. Lead is the German word for song. They were writing operas, cantatas. Basically, it's almost like vocal music up till Beethoven in some ways functioned more on a grander scale. Cantatas were for church that had a function. Operas were literally the movies of the day. Opera like Don Giovanni, the Magic Flute. These were the fantasy, the Lord of the Rings movies. Fantasy that people could go and enjoy. This very intimate relationship of singer and piano on a stage or in a parlor was not really even popularized by Beethoven. It was Franz Schubert who would follow Beethoven that really made that. He made lead in many ways, that the whole concept of this art form. But for sure, Schubert, being someone that was a pallbearer at Beethoven's funeral, was someone that admired Beethoven beyond anything. Schubert would have known this song, and Schubert, I believe, would have empathized and taken this to into his own world. So that's a good point to make, Dimitri, because people forget that this whole idea of singer piano really was not really considered to be perhaps a fruitful endeavor at the time. It was considered that if you're going to write for voice, make it big, make it. And also, I think it's interesting to note that perhaps at the time there weren't as many talented singers as there might have been in coming years, because again, a lot of times when you think about Mozart operas or such, I mean, there are definitely roles that are extremely difficult, and those were called for by the divas and divos of the time. But the average singer, I think, these cantatas, more choral type things, you can get away with not being the most exquisite, technically proficient singer and sound great in church or in a chorus of a symphony. And it's very exposed to be singing just with the piano. Just with the piano, you have to be a totally different type of singer, even from opera. It's so different. So, thanks for bringing that up. But I know that, and again, this song I would say is definitely probably more in Beethoven's middle period. And I think we'd like to probably take a look at some of Beethoven's other middle period piano music. Dimitri, would you like to play or chat about some of his other music?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was going to say that definitely we're into the middle period now of Beethoven, which is more lyrical in a way, less kind of stuck into the structure as it was sometimes in the first period. And actually, one of the sonatas that is really contemporary to this song you played is the Tempest Sonata, which is a very famous, of course, sonata. And of course, yeah, with the main theme then. And so on and so on. So that's really the middle period of Beethoven. And someone commented about the Sturm und Drang, movements, and that's really true about the middle period of Beethoven. So that's kind of this very early romantic feeling that was actually initiated by Haydn also. And so yeah, that's really the middle period of Beethoven. And I wanted to maybe play a part of one of his most famous works, which is the Concerto for Piano Number 4. So Beethoven wrote 5 piano concertos, and he is probably the first composer to write such huge concertos, because Mozart wrote concertos, but especially at the beginning they were quite reduced in terms of size, in terms of length. And Beethoven wrote these really huge concertos. I mean, number 4 is almost 42 minutes, so it's really big. And this concerto, the number 4, is probably one of the most famous, and arguably it's my favorite concerto, but of course the number 5 is also amazing. And this concerto was written in 1806, so just 2 years after your song, and it was written in the same time as many masterpieces. So it was written in the same time as the Appassionata Sonata, as the 4th Symphony as well, and it was premiered in 1808, I believe, 1808, I think, and it was played in the same time as the 5th Symphony, as the 6th Symphony, and as the choral fantasy, for piano, orchestra, and choir, which is an amazing piece as well. So this was a very, very important period for Beethoven, when he wrote so many great masterpieces, actually, in a couple of years. And yeah, so I will just play. Of course, it will be a bit complicated to play this concerto without the orchestra, because I don't have an orchestra here. But I will play my piano solo part for the beginning of the first movement, and then after I finish, I can play for you some little cues for the orchestra, just so you can understand a bit what's going on there. But I will just play the piano solo part first. And actually, it's interesting also for you guys who are watching us to see how we work, how we practice a concerto when we don't have the orchestra. We always have to kind of imagine what the orchestra is doing, or singing actually also what the orchestra is doing. So that's quite interesting, I think, for you also. So I will play the beginning of the first movement of the 4th concerto, and then we can discuss a little. So don't be surprised if you hear some blanks, some silent moments. It's basically because the orchestra is supposed to play. and then the orchestra takes over. So I will just play what the orchestra is doing. And with the first theme. And so on and so on. So basically, there are 3 pages where I don't do anything, so I have to wait for a couple of minutes before I play again. And in this whole exposition, the piano is not always doing the melody, actually, also. There are lots of accompanying things which still are very interesting. You know, you shouldn't feel when you're the pianist and you don't play the melody that you should play, you know, less or whatever. It's still, because it's Beethoven and it's very refined and it's very well written, you still have to play very convincingly. So for example, for this theme, when the orchestra is playing, and the piano is just doing, you know, and so one of the aspects of, you know, practicing piano concerto, I don't know how you do it, Dominic, but one of the important thing is to obviously to sing what the orchestra is doing. I mean, at least in your head, but also to try to sing it. So, or to play if you can divide your hands. But for example, here you necessarily have to play this in the same time. So yeah, and this throughout the concerto. And what is very difficult also is, especially with this concerto, it's probably different with other concertos, is that it's really divided in little parts which are really different, you know, musically and technically. So it's quite difficult to, because you have this introduction. Don't do anything, then you play, then yeah, then you again have a break at the end of this, and then you play this. So there are lots of breaks, and it's very difficult actually to practice it, but still, you know, not to cut the music in a way, because when you play with orchestra, obviously you cannot cut because you have the orchestra playing the thing and there is some kind of movement. But when you play alone, it's easy to kind of get stuck a bit. So I think it's important to play the orchestra part when you practice alone. I mean, that's how I do it. I don't know how you you do it, but I guess that's an important thing.
Yeah, so sometimes what I do, which is kind of fun, is I record the orchestra part, and then I put headphones on, and I kind of play along to myself. So certainly there, a lot of times, you know, like Dimitri said, sometimes the hardest part with a lot of this music is integrating your solo part into the orchestral part, rhythmically, melodically, and all of the above. So yeah, it's always, I feel like whenever, I don't know about you, Dimitri, but whenever I get on stage for the first rehearsal with orchestra with any concerto, even one that I've played a dozen times, it's always kind of like you're meeting someone for the first time and you're getting to know them, and it's definitely it's exciting, a little scary too at the same time. So, but hopefully after the first rehearsal or two, you know, things are smooth sailing. So. But yeah, this is my favorite concerto as well, without a doubt. And I think it's worth noting that, in my opinion, it's the most difficult concerto that Beethoven
I
wrote,
think so, yeah.
as well. It's so someone actually, a woman named Ellie, mentioned that Beethoven is this sort of romantic hero, and I can't agree more. In this concerto, we really see this. We see, particularly in the second movement, I think you might agree, Dimitri, that we see this hero who's against fate, or against some kind of behemoth. Because again, the orchestra opens up the second movement with a very arresting da dum da dum
E
da.
minor, which is very not very usual key actually for the time also.
Absolutely. So, and then I always feel like in the second movement, the pianist is taming the orchestra. He's it's something out of maybe the Odyssey, something out of Odysseus's travels, where he's charming with his charisma, or with his words, or his some kind of magic. This animal or beast. But yeah, truly a magical concerto. No doubt about it. Um, and is there anything else that you want to talk about with that concerto?
Yeah,
Or?
probably just a little bit about the second movement, which is also very unusual as a structure. And so you have, as you mentioned, you have the beginning of the orchestra. So what is very interesting is that the orchestra and the piano are playing in turn, basically. So the orchestra does something, then the piano replies, then the orchestra does something, and the piano replies again. So it's we almost don't play together in this movement, which is very unusual, of course, for the time. So you have the orchestra which starts, so very strong, character, and very determined character. And then the piano starts with this very lyrical melody, like a choral. Then again, the orchestra. Then the piano. So yeah, in the end, I played the whole movement because it's too beautiful to miss. So very, very unusual, very modern movement, I find, for that time. And one interesting thing is that, I played the concerto, just to make a break from Beethoven for 2 seconds. I played the concerto number 3 of Bartók. And in the second movement, Bartók clearly, imitates what Beethoven is doing here, where he alternates the orchestra and the piano, because you have the orchestra doing etc., and then the piano doing the melody here. The orchestra. So the whole movement is based, on this. So for sure, this movement of Beethoven had really an influence on music in general, and on this concerto in particular of Bartók. So yeah, I think I said what I had to say about this concerto. If you want to add something.
Oh, well, again, it's a really special work, and for me, I would say that penultimate note, that F sharp, at the very end of the second movement, is just one of the most special notes in music. That appository, that suspension, it's so painful. And what's really brilliant is, of course, that it resolves to an E, and then that E becomes. And then the third movement is just one of the most charming, delightful, almost games of tag. Children kind of running to tag each other that you can have. So that's one of the reasons that for me this concerto means so much, is that there's a whole world in it. There's this unbelievable drama of the second movement. There's this mountain of a first movement, and then there's finally this
joyful
third movement. So I urge everyone to again go listen to this particular concerto. And I would say that this concerto is also a nice segue, a nice transition to his late period, because in this concerto, it's really important to note that up till this point, Mozart, Haydn, other composers, when they wrote concerti, it was kind of assumed that the pianist would improvise a cadenza, their own cadenza, because Mozart would improvise his own cadenzas. Cadenzas are basically moments where the orchestra disappears, they're quiet, and the pianist kind of improvises upon the themes, upon the music that has been played. It usually happens at the end of the first movement, sometimes at the end of the third movement. But it's kind of a time to show off in some ways. But in this concerto, of course, as Dimitri knows, Beethoven wrote his own cadenzas that are highly suggested because of how great they are. Beethoven always wrote his own cadenzas because he really sometimes thought that, I don't necessarily want you improvising badly upon my concerto. And then in his fifth concerto, Beethoven doesn't even give you the option. He just writes the cadenzas right into the music. You have no option but to play his cadenzas. And that is sort of indicative of Beethoven's increasingly, his desire for the composer to continue to take more and more precedent over the soloist in some ways. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I would say that sometimes in early, one of the things that Beethoven was a bit allergic to was the idea of a soloist, of a pianist, of a musician kind of taking the piece and manipulating it in ways that were not true to the score. Beethoven was always someone that really believed that what he wrote is what he meant. And the more you study his music, the more you see, which is amazing. From Opus 2, number 1, from Opus 1, you see the markings. They have a life of their own. They're not random. They're never random. And they're always something that shows you the markings. What he does is ways that he shows how genius he is. So I think that, again, as he got later and later in his life and his ideas became more and more dramatic, more experimental, as we'll see in a movement of a sonata I'm about to play, we see that Beethoven really is adamant that, no, this is what I meant, this is what I wrote, this is what I want you to play, don't play something else. Because sometimes, some of his late music, you say, really? Is this right? And Beethoven's like, absolutely, do not second guess me. Do not second guess me, because again, sometimes genius is ahead of its time, and Beethoven was definitely ahead of his time. Whether it's the early sonatas that today we listen to them and we say, oh, it sounds fine, despite having chords like these tone clusters, which today sound okay, but at the time, hearing. That's a rather unusual five-note chord that Beethoven was already writing in his early years. But again, this concerto really exemplifies his obsession with getting his point across.
Yeah, because just one word about the cadenza here in this concerto, which is literally like a second development.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even cadenza anymore. It's really like 5 minutes block, of music, which develops again what we heard in different ways. So that's of course very structural moment in his musical development.
Absolutely, and I would say that this translates even to the sonata that I'll be playing in a movement from right now, the very famous Hammerklavier Sonata, Opus 106. This is definitely late Beethoven, late period Beethoven. Again, this is 1817, 1818 when he wrote it. He was very proud of this work. It's his longest work. It's almost 50 minutes. Now, I won't play all of it for you today, and to be honest, talking about this sonata could take hours to really get everything out of it. But to keep things a little brief, this sonata is really unique in the sense that it has a semi-traditional first movement, which I will play, which I feel this first movement kind of shows aspects of each movement that you'll hear later on. Not today, but if you listen to the piece. Beethoven is becoming increasingly obsessed with the idea of a fugue. A fugue is something that has the voices following one another in canon. Basically, you hear a melody, and it happens, and then another melody comes in, and another melody comes in. It's sort of a round of sorts, but a more complicated round. And in this sonata, to be very brief, there's a movement that's actually called an improvisation. But of course, Beethoven writes out. It's called an introduction. It's sort of an improvisational type introduction. But Beethoven, of course, doesn't give you any option to improvise your own introduction. He writes exactly what he wants you to write, even down to the finest 16th rest. But in this first movement that I'll play, it's sort of it's kind of the Mount Everest of the piano sonata repertoire in some ways. I would say this sonata, for me at least, in my experience, and this first movement is kind of terrifying to play at times, even from the very first jump, which the left hand has to navigate as best one can. But we'll see in this first movement a really triumphant theme that's followed by wonderfully intertwining music that sort of gracefully floats through the air, and the development has a fugue. Beethoven writes a little fugue that's hinting at the final movement fugue. Again, the reason that Beethoven, I think, is obsessed with fugue is because he's becoming more and more obsessed about rules. Rules in the sense that in his personal life, at this time, he would have been really fighting strongly to gain custody in the court of law for his nephew. And his brother Karl unfortunately passed away, and his nephew was in the custody of Karl's wife, who Beethoven didn't quite trust. I don't think that there's necessarily Beethoven. I don't know if Beethoven had a valid reason for not trusting her, but he wanted to take care of the nephew, so he went to court to fight for custody of his nephew Karl. And I think that this struggle, this frustration, this obsession with being able to raise Karl might hint at, again, his struggles with not being able to raise, perhaps, his other daughter, Minona, that I mentioned earlier. I don't know for sure about this, but these are things that I find interesting and things that I always think about as I'm playing Beethoven. But in any case, I think I'll play the Hammerklavier's first movement, the Allegro, for you now. So please enjoy. Thank you,
Oh,
thank you. Sorry about that little page turn snafu,
it's fine.
but still, the yeah, this sonata is one that it means a lot to me personally because it feels like Beethoven's is trying to climb higher and higher with it, and it's really just almost like in some ways, it's one of the most difficult sonatas he wrote because he talks about how this sonata, particularly the last movement, will give pianists troubles for the next 50 years. And I think that I still have my own troubles with this sonata, over 50 years later. So it's a truly fantastic work and one that I think that I would say that interestingly enough, I wouldn't necessarily say that from a young age I was always gravitating toward it, but as I've grown older and I've studied more about Beethoven, his music resonates more and more, and this sonata has been meaning. It's taken on a new life and new meaning for me as I continue to grow and appreciate his voice and his music. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun. But I don't know, Dimitri. I'm sure you've heard this piece before. It's quite you have to be ready for it. I would say it's about 50 minutes of music, and it's you'd agree that it's sometimes not the easiest listening as how long it is. It's longer than most symphonies.
I mean, for sure, what a piece. I mean, it's really a mountain, and it's, as you said, not so easy probably to listen to it and to understand everything that is going on.
Absolutely.
Especially when you listen to it for the first time, or even the second time, or even the 10th time. There are still many things to discover, every time you listen to it, and obviously when you start working on it.
Absolutely.
And yeah, that's probably one of the 5 sonatas, which are I don't know if it's the most probably it's the most difficult, I would say, but in any case it's among the 3 to 5 most difficult sonatas.
Absolutely.
Beethoven, and yeah, I mean, it's really characteristic of his last period, where he does whatever he wants. In fact, he doesn't really care anymore about what a classical sonata should be, because in the structure he adds everything he wants to add in there.
That's right.
I think.
Right.
Yeah.
But did you also? I know that you've played Opus 109, which is a sonata that follows this one by a little bit of time. Did you want to play a few little excerpts
Yeah,
from
sure,
that one?
sure. Yeah, I wanted to play just few bars, and because I think actually this sonata couldn't be any more different. The the Opus 109 is so different to the 106, and I would say that in the 3, what we call the 3 last sonatas of Beethoven, so 109, 110, 111, of course they are very experimental, but in a way they are also simpler, like not technically, of course, because they are very, very complicated, but I don't know, there is some kind of economy of means, in the 3 last sonatas, in a way. So you have 2 of them you have this theme with variations, in 109 and in 111, which are very simple theme, very clear and themes. So I think it's very different from 106 and 101 as well. It's also very different in character. And the first movement of 109 have this very clear, very peaceful theme. And then this, explosion of sentiment a bit, So it's very different from what you played, and it's even more lyrical and it's even more romantic, also in a way.
Yes, absolutely. Which is again wonderful because I would say with Beethoven, it's kind of like whatever flavor you desire. If you're in the mood for a particular style of Beethoven, he composed literally every type. It's for me 109 is some of the most beautiful music that he wrote. It's so pleasant and easy to listen to. I will say with the Hammerklavier, I feel like Beethoven is challenging not just the performer but the listener. I think that he's
Challenging
writing.
music in general. I mean, he's trying to push it, to the extreme in a way.
Yes, yes, he is. He's trying. I mean, we don't have time to do this, but the slow movement of the Hammerklavier is over 20 minutes long. That's longer than the entire first piano sonata that he composed when he was younger. So he's really putting the listener into the hot seat in some ways. And when you sign up to go to a concert of the Hammerklavier, or you have to. Sometimes it's there should be a warning label, perhaps. Get ready for something very very unique, special, and amazing. but again, the Opus 109 is a sonata that I think anybody can enjoy. The very opening is just so beautiful with these cascading harmonies, and how you play it is gorgeous. But yeah, so
Thank you. And just to mention as well the last movement of Opus 109, which is one of the most beautiful things ever written in general, with this theme and variations, where you get this this Beethoven of the Ninth Symphony, the universal Beethoven, the metaphysical Beethoven, where, as I said, there is economy of means, so it's not as exuberant as the 106, but still you have this universal feeling when you listen to the we'll just play the theme of the third movement. So you have this very simple theme, but yet so beautiful and so, amazing. And you have, variations. And I wanted to note that somehow I feel some similarities between this theme and variations and the theme and variations I played in the beginning of this stream with Opus 26. You have kind of the same mood, because you have this very slow theme. And you have kind of the same spirit of variations also, because you have, in Opus 26, you have this. And here you have, in the Opus 109, so, probably, it's what Beethoven now does with variations, which is similar in a way, but also so much more, developed also in more kind of special in a way, also because it's, the later period. So it's, because it's the same number of variations as well, and there are really some similarities I found. because he also follows the theme quite strictly in this movement. He doesn't go too much into explorations as he did in Diabelli variations, for example, And so yeah, amazing, of course, movement, and you have this really amazing finale, with the. So yeah, really amazing finale. Overly difficult also to to play, but yeah. So yeah, just to mention also this one of the three last sonatas he wrote, which are amazing. So we started with Opus 2, number 1, 1794, and we end with Opus 109, 1820. So in 25 years, so many different styles and ways of writing. So that's really amazing.
Yeah, truly mind-boggling, and it feels like more than it feels like multiple lifetimes almost when you play all these works, and it's crazy to think it's coming out of one man in a quarter century, basically.
Because some composers didn't have this kind of evolution. If you listen to, I don't know, Brahms, I mean, of course, there are differences between his first pieces and his last pieces, but more or less,
That's true.
kind of the same thing,
Yeah.
Or if you listen even to Chopin, it's from beginning to last. Of course, there are some differences, but it's more or less the same style. But here, from Opus 2, number 1 to Opus 109, it's different worlds, clearly.
Absolutely, it's really inspiring, honestly, because I think something as artists that we always try to strive for is sort of adventure and sort of searching for a higher form, a higher level of art and expression, and better ways to communicate to our audiences and communicate messages that are so important to humanity. And I think Beethoven was really, in some ways, the king of that concept, of how he was able to touch so many people with his music, whether it's the Ninth Symphony, it's the Eroica Symphony, it's the Fifth Symphony, it's his, or any of his piano sonatas or whatever. And it's important to note that, I don't know about you, Dimitri, but I always feel like his piano sonatas are his most intimate and sometimes his most experimental works. Like, it's almost like we're in his laboratory. All these 32 sonatas, he's really he has all these different processes and different things that he enjoys searching through in these sonatas, whether it's from the beginning to the end. So of course he wrote more piano sonatas than any other medium. So the piano is always really central to him. So it's But again, I mean, I think we've really I know I've really enjoyed being here today. It's been almost 2 hours of being with everybody, and it's if anyone has any questions, feel free to feel free to write them. But I know that everyone's been so responsive throughout the chat, and I know Dimitri and I have been responding furiously as the other one is performing. But I really appreciate everyone's enthusiasm that's been viewing, and I know I had a blast, and my day is just starting, so I'm kind of going to be riding this Beethoven high throughout my day, and I know that Dimitri and Alex and everyone in Europe is going to go to sleep. I don't know how you'll sleep after all this excitement, all this celebration of Beethoven, but I'm sure it'll take some winding down. But yeah, I mean, it's been a pleasure. Anything else you'd like to add, Dimitri? Or?
Yeah, I mean, for me too, it was really, really amazing because, I mean, that we could still, celebrate Beethoven, because obviously all the pieces at least the pieces I played today, I was supposed to play for proper, Beethoven celebration on stage, but this didn't happen. So I'm really happy we could still do it and share it with you guys. I think we were quite many to be on that live stream today. So thanks a lot, guys, and probably we should try it again on another topic. I think it would be
Absolutely
really great.
No, I think you and I share a lot of common interests. So everyone, stay tuned. I have no doubt that we'll be doing more of these in the future. I know that I've had a great time chatting with Dimitri, playing for everybody, and it's a great way to stay connected and keep art alive and well during this virtual time. So thanks again to Alex and Cindy of the InPulse Creatives. I know that Alex worked tirelessly to try and make this experience as pleasant for the audience as possible, because this is to tell everyone, this is a very complicated process of getting two different people streaming at the same time with good quality video, audio. So I know Alex has been a champion for this project, and he's been the orchestrator of getting this whole thing going. So he deserves quite a bit of credit.
Yeah, for sure, because really the difficulty here was to talk, it's something, but also have a very good quality of sound for the piano in the meantime, it was really a difficult task. So yeah, I'm really glad we could make it happen, and thanks a lot to Alex for
I'm gonna slip in, and thank you very much, guys, for that. Thank you very much for this wonderful time. That was awesome. A lot of people in the stream. It was awesome. Look at little Beethoven here. Ludwig. And yeah, so thank you very much to all of you on chat. Thank you very much for the people who followed. We're there. I think we had a peak at 46, I think, which is the first peak we had on the channel. Thank you to both of you, and I think you answered to all the questions. I was ready, to write down some questions, but I saw you responded very quickly, very well. So thank you for that. Again, do not hesitate to follow to have more content. We have still a lot of things to happen until the end of the month. January, new schedule is going to come up also, and subscribe if you want to support the artist. But yeah, I think I don't have anything to add more. If you guys have anything, I don't know, or we can just definitely say goodbye to them.
I think we
covered everything. Yeah, you're right. Okay, so guys, thank you again for that. That was wonderful. That was incredible. And wish you a good morning, a good day for you, Dominic, and a nice evening to you, Dimitri. And for all of you, wherever you are, thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned and see you later on InPulse Creatives channel. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.